He walked on stage to 20,000 voices, but one whisper cut through them all. Madison Square Garden, June 10th, 1972. A frail boy with a hand-drawn sign asked Elvis for the last thing he'd ever want. Security reached first. Elvis heard second. What he did next froze the arena and rewrote the night. New York pulsed like an electric current that night. Saturday, June 10th, 1972. Madison Square Garden stood lit like a crown in the middle of Manhattan. Inside, more than 20,000 fans pressed shoulder to shoulder, their shouts echoing like thunder through the bowl of the arena. The stage shimmered with spotlights. James Burton tuned his guitar, the sharp notes slicing through the crowd's hum. J.D. Sumner tested his bass line, so low it rattled the seats. Charlie Hodge stepped out, carefully draping a soft blue scarf over the microphone stand. A ritual Elvis repeated at every show, the smell of cologne mixed with the faint salt of popcorn. Fans clutched ticket stubs like treasure, waving them in the glow of the house lights. The set list whispered in the air: C.C. Ryder, Proud Mary, Polk Salad Annie. In section 116, row H, a small hand lifted a piece of cardboard above the heads. The letters shook as though written by a child. The words were simple, uneven, almost lost in the blur of neon. One wish before I go. Sing for me, Elvis. Beside the sign, a boy leaned against his mother, his chest rising with effort. His face was pale, eyes wide, as if he were staring at the biggest dream of his life, unfolding only 100 feet away. His name was Tommy, 9 years old, too young to be carrying the weight he carried. His mother, Gloria, held him tightly, her voice caught in her throat. The crowd roared when Elvis appeared, stepping into the light with a smile that could break a storm. Sequins flashed like fire as he nodded to the band. The drums kicked. The night had begun. But while thousands screamed his name, one faint cough disappeared into the noise. The boy's sign trembled, almost slipping from his hands. His lips moved with words too soft for anyone but his mother to hear. What does a whisper sound like in a storm of cheers? Can one fragile voice ever rise above 20,000? A mother's voice tried to reach the stage, but it missed, until someone unexpected turned. Gloria Alvarez's hands shook as she lifted the cardboard higher. She was 31, a young widow, her eyes dark from sleepless nights at St. Jude's Hospital. Beside her, Tommy pressed into her arm. His skin glowed too white beneath the garden lights. Each breath rattled like paper tearing. Yet he held his own sign, determined not to let it fall. Their seats read Section 116, Row H. From there, the stage looked close, but impossibly far. The words on the sign were clear now to anyone near them. One wish before I go. Sing for me, Elvis. Some fans turned their heads, their smiles fading into silence. An usher noticed. He radioed quickly, his voice tight, calling for Dick Grob, the man in charge of keeping Elvis safe. Grob was a wall of muscle and calm, but tonight his eyes narrowed. In the world of sold-out arenas, any breach could mean chaos. On stage, the band charged into C.C. Ryder. The floor thumped with the stomp of thousands. People danced, screamed, reached for scarves and smiles. Flashbulbs burst like lightning across the dark bowl. But in one pocket of the crowd, silence lingered, as if 20,000 strangers were holding their breath for a boy who might not see another year. Tommy coughed hard into his sleeve. Gloria held him steady. She had promised him one last memory worth carrying, not doctors, not machines, not quiet rooms, something alive, something loud, something shining. Grob moved closer, scanning for the sign. 2 other guards flanked him, pushing back eager fans. To them, it was just another interruption, maybe a risk, maybe someone trying to climb closer. The cardboard wavered in and out of sight as taller bodies blocked it, the edges bending under sweaty hands. Tommy's lips parted. "Mama," he whispered, too weak for anyone else. His eyes never left the stage, as if willing Elvis to look, to see, to stop. The band rolled into the next chorus. Elvis grinned, tossing a scarf into the pit. The crowd surged forward, a wave of arms clawing upward. The cardboard dipped, pressed hard against Gloria's chest. She fought to lift it again, her knuckles white. Would one man notice a whisper lost in this sea? Would fame blind him? Or would something deeper cut through the noise? The sign tilted, slipped, and then vanished, swallowed behind black suits and headsets. Dick Grob's hand shot up, a silent signal. Hold the line. The guards froze the aisle, pushing fans back into their seats. For them, this was routine. Keep the star safe, keep the crowd moving, never let chaos rise. Yet every second the sign was hidden, Tommy's hope slipped further into the shadows. Colonel Tom Parker, standing near the curtain at stage left, scowled. Timing was everything. Elvis had a strict set list, a rhythm that never broke. The colonel hated interruptions. To him, a moment of pause meant risk, lost momentum, lost money. But in the middle of Proud Mary, Elvis's eyes kept moving past the front rows. He scanned faces as though something tugged at him. Fans screamed and waved scarves, hands stretching desperately. But he wasn't looking for them. He tilted his head, sharp and subtle, the sequins on his jumpsuit catching the glare. There it was, just a corner of cardboard, bent and fragile, like a signal flag from a sinking ship. It flickered above the crowd for only a second before the guards pressed it down again. Elvis frowned. The TCB lightning bolt on his ring caught the spotlight as he strummed the mic stand with restless fingers. The audience sensed his shift. The rhythm wavered. A ripple of unease passed through the arena. A whistle cut the air, then another. Soon the chant began. Elvis! Elvis! The crowd was impatient, hungry for the next surge of sound. On stage, the band kept time, but their eyes darted toward him. James Burton's guitar hung like a question. Ronnie Tutt's sticks hovered, waiting for direction. J.D. Sumner's bass note rumbled, but faltered. Even Charlie Hodge, standing just behind Elvis with a towel and water, leaned forward, reading the moment. The clock of the show ticked in Elvis's head. Keep moving or stop. Fans came here for a spectacle, not silence, and yet he knew that once, years earlier in Tupelo, he had been the boy in the crowd, unseen, unheard, praying for something bigger to reach him. If he looked away, the night would continue. The boy's sign would be folded, forgotten, just another blur in the sea of faces. If he chose to stop, 20,000 people would have to wait in confusion, maybe anger, maybe awe. His jaw set, sweat rolled down his temple. He lifted 2 fingers to the band. The music stopped. The crowd gasped as if the sound had been ripped out of the air. For the first time that night, Madison Square Garden was silent. You could hear a cough in the balcony. You could hear the pop of a camera shutter. You could hear the breathing of a boy who had begged the universe for one more song. What matters more, perfection or compassion? Reputation or risk? Elvis adjusted the mic stand, his voice steady, soft, carrying all the way to the upper decks. Hold it. And in that pause, every single heart in the room leaned forward, waiting to see what came next. The spotlight faded as Elvis lifted his hand. House lights, please. The command echoed across the garden. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the flood of white light snapped on, flooding the entire arena with an unflinching glow. 20,000 faces were suddenly visible, eyes wide, scarves frozen in mid-wave, mouths still open from the last cheer. The show no longer looked like a spectacle. It looked like a gathering of ordinary souls. Elvis stepped away from center stage, his boots clicking softly against the wood. Charlie Hodge followed with a towel and a cup of water, but Elvis waved him back. His gaze was locked on section 116. Sir, Dick Grob said under his breath as he reached the edge of the platform, we've got a situation. Could be nothing. His eyes flicked toward the sign now crumpled in Gloria's arms. Elvis shook his head, slow, deliberate. That one, he said simply. The words travelled no further than Grob's ear, but the meaning rang louder than the amplifiers. The guards shifted uneasily, but when Elvis pointed, no one argued. The crowd murmured, confused. What was happening? Why had the music stopped? A woman in the balcony called out, "We love you, Elvis," but her voice cracked, drowned by the strangeness of the silence. A path opened in section 116, slow and reluctant. Fans parted, still reaching out, brushing shoulders, craning to see. Gloria tightened her arm around Tommy. The boy's head rested against her collarbone, his eyes fluttering, but when the lane cleared, his lips formed a single word. "Elvis." Security guided them forward carefully, not rushing, but making space as though parting a sea. The boy's sneakers shuffled along the concrete. The sign dragged limply at his side. Every step closer brought new gasps from strangers who realized this was no ordinary fan. At the edge of the stage, Elvis knelt. Sequins bent into the light, not as glitter but as armor laid down. He held the blue scarf in one hand. His eyes softened. "What's your name, little man?" The microphone caught every syllable, his drawl warm but steady. The arena fell into a silence so heavy it pressed on the chest. The boy's answer was barely audible. "Tommy." Elvis leaned closer. His voice dropped low. "What's the wish, Tommy?" Charlie Hodge stepped forward, holding a guitar strap as though bracing for a cue. Ronnie Tutt tapped his sticks nervously against his thigh, waiting for a signal to begin. The band, the crowd, the colonel, even the ushers, everyone held still. Tommy licked his lips, his face pale but lit with the effort to be heard. The microphone lowered, and his mother steadied his shoulders. His voice was a whisper against thunder. "I want my mom to remember me." 20,000 people inhaled at once. The drummer froze. The bass hummed into nothing. Flashbulbs did not fire. The garden itself seemed to bow its head. What would you have done standing there, holding all those eyes in your hands? Would you sing, or would you break? Elvis closed his eyes. His grip on the blue scarf tightened. Then he exhaled, and the next move would change the night forever. The garden was no longer a concert hall. It was a heartbeat suspended. Elvis looked at Tommy, then at Gloria, her eyes shining with fear and pride. He turned back to the microphone. His voice came out steady, though every syllable trembled with weight. "Key of C," he told the band quietly. "Soft." Charlie Hodge rushed forward with the old Martin guitar, its wood worn smooth from years of songs. Elvis nodded, slipping the strap over his shoulder. He handed the blue scarf to Tommy, looping it gently around the boy's neck as though crowning him. The scarf shimmered under the white glare, too big for his small shoulders. "This one's for you, buddy," Elvis said. The crowd did not cheer. They waited. Thousands of eyes locked on the boy, who clutched the scarf with both hands as though it might keep him here just a little longer. The first chords rang out, soft and slow, like a hymn whispered in a chapel. "Wise men say," the words floated into the silence, fragile yet unbreakable. The song was "Can't Help Falling in Love," the one he usually ended with. But tonight it began again. Different, slower, personal. Tommy's tiny voice joined in for half a line, cracking on the notes. Elvis leaned down, holding the microphone so the boy's voice echoed through Madison Square Garden. 20,000 people leaned in, straining to hear every second. Gloria covered her mouth. Her tears streaked down her cheeks as her son's wish, simple and heartbreaking, filled the largest arena in the world. Elvis kept his gaze fixed on Tommy. Every word became a promise. "Take my hand, take my whole life too." His voice was rough with emotion, each syllable pulled deep from his chest. Then came the chorus. Elvis stopped singing and raised his hand. "Sing it for him." And the impossible happened. 20,000 strangers obeyed. Their voices rose, not perfect, not polished, but united. Some cracked with sobs, some shook with awe. It was messy, human, and it was everything. Madison Square Garden became a choir, carrying Tommy's wish higher than any single voice could reach. The boy leaned into the mic again, whispering a line too faint to follow. But Elvis caught it. He nodded, smiling down with tenderness that broke the heart of even the hardest man in the room. When the song drew near its end, Elvis pulled the pick from his guitar and pressed it into Tommy's hand. "So you can start when you're ready," he whispered. The words were not just for the boy. They were for his mother, for everyone watching, for every fan who knew this was not a concert anymore. It was a moment carved out of time. The final chord rang. Silence lingered, longer than any applause break in his career. People were afraid to breathe, as if the sound itself might shatter what they had just witnessed. Elvis looked back at the crowd. His eyes were wet, but his voice was clear. "Tonight," he said, pausing as though to make sure it reached the rafters, "the star is a boy who taught us how to listen." The ovation crashed like a tidal wave. Not screams, not chaos, applause that sounded like gratitude. People stood, clapping through tears, waving scarves not at Elvis, but at Tommy, who now sat in his mother's arms with the blue scarf across his shoulders. What would you remember if you were there? The sequins, the song, or the boy who made 20,000 people silent just to hear him breathe? The garden shook with the sound, yet above it all, the boy smiled, and that smile would last longer than the show. Backstage, after the final bow, Elvis wiped his face with a towel. Dick Grob was already waiting with a report. "The boy's name is Tommy Alvarez," he said quietly. 9 years old, St. Jude patient. They don't think he's got long. Elvis leaned against the wall, his jumpsuit heavy with sweat. "St. Jude," he repeated, his voice cracking. "In Memphis?" Grob nodded. Elvis stared at the floor for a long moment. Then he said, "We'll handle the travel. Make sure they're taken care of." 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Inside was a check written in Tommy's name, enough to cover every cost. There was also a note in Elvis's familiar handwriting. "Let a boy lead, and a crowd will follow." He underlined the word lead twice. Quietly, without press, Elvis visited. No cameras, no colonel, just a Polaroid snapped by a nurse. Elvis in a simple jacket, Gloria by his side, Tommy sitting between them, the blue scarf draped across a chair. That Polaroid would later be framed on the hospital wall, its colours fading, but its meaning unshakable. Fans whispered about the garden night. A bootleg cassette surfaced, labelled in shaky blue pen, MSG 61072, Balcony C. The tape hissed, the recording rough, but you could hear it clearly. The moment the music stopped, the hush of 20,000 people, and the fragile voice of a child. Over the years, the legend only grew. Fan clubs wrote about it in newsletters. A diary entry surfaced from a woman named Maria, who had been seated in the upper deck that night. She wrote, "I never saw anything like it again. Elvis was a king, but for those few minutes, he gave his crown away." In 2010, St. Jude unveiled a small plaque near the children's wing. It read, "In memory of Tommy Alvarez, who taught an arena to listen." Visitors still stop there, some pressing their hands gently against the cool metal, as if trying to feel the echo of that night. Which moments become monuments? Which words outlive the man who spoke them? Decades later, at a tribute show, a grown voice in the audience rose during a pause. "I was there," the man said, his voice trembling. "I heard the hush." The crowd applauded, not for Elvis this time, but for a memory that refused to die. Some nights fade, some nights leave scars, but some, like June 10th, 1972, keep echoing forever. The final chord had faded, but Elvis didn't move. His eyes searched the sea of faces before settling again on Tommy. Gloria clutched her son close, the blue scarf glowing under the lights like a banner of hope. Elvis raised the microphone one last time, his voice rough from tears, carried clear as a bell. "Tonight, the star is a boy who taught us how to listen." Those words hung in the rafters like a prayer. The ovation that followed wasn't wild or frenzied. It was steady, reverent, like 1,000 hands pressed together in gratitude. That night, Elvis turned fame into a mirror. He made the world stop, not with power, but with gentleness. And for a moment, the loudest man in music proved that silence could be his greatest song. How often do we forget to listen? Who in our lives is whispering right now, hoping someone will turn and hear them? The spotlight dimmed, the scarf lay folded on Tommy's chest, and the storm of cheers finally gave way to awe. Stories like this don't belong to history alone. They live every time we choose to hear the quietest voice in the room. Elvis gave his stage away that night, but the truth is, any of us can do the same. Compassion doesn't shrink when shared. It multiplies. If this story moved you, pass it on. Share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness can fill a stadium. Leave a comment. Who in your life deserves to be the star for one night?